to all. As we unify in a field of coherence, we are offered great wisdom from the One. As we unify in a field of coherence, we are
That one works. Okay. Hello, everybody. Hello. I'm going to give everyone a few minutes to get on, to click on. Yes, that one works. Okay. Hello, everybody. Hello. I'm going to give everyone a few minutes to Hello. I'm gonna get. Hello, everyone who's watching.
It's a purge. We're being called to rise up. We are being called to rise up, to stand up. This is a call for humanity to rise up, stand up, together.
Hey everybody, nice to be back. Hello and welcome to, I'm not going to say Liz Live, I'm going to say Uplift. This is the new version of Liz Live. Are you ready to be uplifted? I hope so. So I wanted to play some music and let everybody, have some time to log on. And the link that is actually live right now is not the link that I think I sent everybody because I couldn't figure out how to turn it on. So of course, first night back, there's gonna be a little bit of confusion. There's gonna be a little bit of time. It's gonna take a little bit of time for everybody to get on, and that's okay. We'll make it happen. And anyone who misses this, of course, there's always, I'm gonna leave this one up so you guys can watch it tomorrow. But welcome back to Uplift Me. And for those of you who have never been here, who've never seen my show, I'm gonna reintroduce myself and just tell you a little bit about the show and about myself and who I am. And then we're gonna get into tonight's topic, which is trauma. And if you follow me on social media, if you follow me on Facebook, then you know that the past couple days I've been posting a lot of videos about trauma. about how to understand it, how to define it, and of course, how to cope with it. You know, all those things are really important. And I thought it would be a really good topic for right now because so much is going on in the world, so much is going on out there that it's traumatizing to watch. And I don't want to focus on that, but I think it's sort of the vibe of the times. You know, the world is a little bit flipped upside down. Not that it hasn't been for a little while now, but there's some things that we're seeing that are traumatizing. And so we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about how you can cope with your specific trauma. So to start out, again, this is now called Uplift. And you may have seen my show before, which was Liz Live. And I used to do Liz Live on Facebook and Instagram. And I don't know, after tonight, I still may play around with Instagram and Facebook and see, but I really want to get a bigger audience and I want to make it very consistent. So I want to bring everybody to YouTube so that I can make and put out more content. And I'm also starting a Patreon account, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and how you can sign up to get more of my content. Okay, so let's get into it. So I am Liz Lander. Elizabeth Stadtlander is my full name, but it's too long for people to say and spell. So when I started doing a lot of lives, I just cut it short to Liz Lander and made it easier for everybody. And I am a marriage and family therapist and mental health counselor, and I'm coming up on 15 years in this business. So I have a lot of experience working with individuals, couples, and families on a range of issues, really everything from relationships to addiction to empowering people who have been in abusive relationships, personality disorders, and most recently, I added sort of a spiritual twist to a lot of my work, which if you're my client, you know about. I'm also a Reiki master and studied 3 different types of Reiki, which is energy healing. And I like to bring some of that into my work too for those people who are open to it. For those of you who are open to it. And if you're not open to it, that's okay. I'm still a therapist to you, but to everyone else, I'm a therapist with, you know, a little bit more to offer than just your average therapist. So I was on air all the time, and then boom, I wasn't on air. So a lot of people have been asking, where have you been? What's been going on? Why haven't you been doing your shows? And the simple answer to that is I was really, really busy, and it's hard to, you know, manage a practice by yourself and do all this on air work because I'm talking all day and putting out my energy all day, and it gets to be a lot. So the last couple years, I've just been working on myself, changing, growing, studying, learning more. And the more I work on myself, the more I can help my clients and all of you who are watching. So that's something that's always very important to me. I also was living in Sweden for about 5 or 6 months. Last year, and that was a great experience. Love the country, great people, but I'm back home now. I came back in September, and I am back in practice, and I am ready to be back with you guys every week, doing lives and helping everybody with their various issues and problems. And there's a chat here. So you can feel free to, just like when we were on Facebook or Instagram, you can comment, you can write questions, and I will get to your questions probably towards the latter part of the show. So that's kind of where I've been. I've been studying a lot of Reiki, a lot of energy healing, which I'll explain another time. And I've continued to work on my skills and my practice. And I'm very happy to be back here tonight, and I hope that this becomes something that you all look forward to and that you really feel uplifted after watching. The reason I called it Uplift is because that's really truly what I want to do. I want to uplift people from whatever it is that they're going through, or even if it's just nothing specific, but you just want to be uplifted. Everybody needs uplifted. So I don't want this show to be problem focused. I want it to be solution focused. And I want everyone to turn this, when this is over, I hope that everybody feels better. And that's truly what I'm hoping for. And I have a lot of really exciting things happening in my practice. I'm starting to pull back a little bit from seeing clients. I mean, I still do it, but I'm not as available as I used to be. And I'm moving more towards doing this kind of work, doing lives, doing video work, and I'm also starting to teach a lot of courses, and courses that are therapeutic. So instead of going to therapy one-on-one, which for some people is just, maybe too expensive or they don't have the time, I'm going to be offering classes. My first one is this Sunday, and we'll talk more about that again towards the end, where you can participate virtually, and you'll have me here to guide you and teach you about specific topics. And this Sunday is trauma, and that's sort of the issue of the week. And so we'll keep moving and taking requests and doing what we can to heal and uplift everybody out there through this work and any other work. So let's get started and let's get uplifted from trauma. So let's talk about trauma. Everybody has been traumatized at some point in their life. It's just a fact of life. And to define trauma quickly, because I have been doing that on my social media, but to redefine trauma. Trauma is basically an event that either you experienced or you witnessed others experiencing that was absolutely horrific. Things that could be probably are traumatizing are things like abuse, any kind of abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse in childhood. We also have many things. Someone's texting me during the show. That's not a good sign. Either someone forgot or something's wrong. Oh no, she forgot. Okay, good. Like, someone can't hear me. So trauma is when we experience or witness somebody else experiencing something horrific. And when I say horrific, I'm talking about accidents, fires, things like watching someone we love getting hurt, suffering, death of a loved one is a big one. Any kind of violence, whether it's sexual in nature, physical in nature. And when we talk about loss of a job can be traumatizing, loss of your home, loss of money, loss of a pet, loss of friends, loss of anything that was near and dear to you. All of that stuff is traumatizing. It is so hurtful and so painful to go through that your emotional system literally cannot handle it. So we have built-in mechanisms in our beautiful, brilliant human bodies that protect us from traumatizing things. So when we're going through trauma, any of the things I mentioned, plus many other things, when we're going through traumatic events or traumatic periods of time, because sometimes traumatizing events will, last years or months, just depending on, the situation. When it's so overwhelming, your body actually kind of shuts off and says, okay, I have to survive. I have to get through this time. I have to get through this incident, but I can't get through and survive if I stay focused on this traumatizing event or issue. So the body kind of shuts off and compartmentalizes that event or events somewhere energetically in your brain, probably in the back of your hippocampus where past memories are stored. But it doesn't go through the typical process that we all human beings have for processing emotion. There's a whole beautiful systemic process that we go through to actually process all emotions. And trauma is one of those emotional happenings that are just too painful and too big to really go through that process. And so your brain kind of blocks it off, numbs you out, and puts it in the back somewhere in the back of your brain, I believe in the hippocampus, and somehow we carry on, but we are still in shock. So when we're initially traumatized, we experience a lot of almost otherworldly experiences emotionally. We feel disconnected to the world around us. We feel continuously anxious. We become very forgetful. We become very hyper-focused on the traumatic event. We might replay scenes from that event over and over again. And this can go on for a really long time. And for any of you, and I'm not going to say for any of you, we've all been traumatized. I've never met anyone who hasn't been through some sort of trauma. I'm sure there's people out there. I just don't know any of them. But I've been through trauma. You've all been through trauma. Anyone who's ever going to watch this will have experienced some sort of trauma. And trauma can be relative, meaning what might traumatize one person may not traumatize the other one. And a lot of that can come with cultural differences, right? I was thinking about Israel and what's going on in Israel. Israel traditionally has become used to bombings and terrorism. And so when you meet people from Israel and you talk to people from Israel, they're kind of like, they're really tough and they have this attitude that, we just have to go on, we have to go on, we have to go on. Where other cultures who maybe aren't used to that are going to feel even more traumatized than somebody who's kind of got that thick skin from being traumatized so much. So cultural differences, that's just an example of how they can make trauma kind of vary, and it can be relative, but we all know the basics. We all know the basic things that traumatize us. It's not that hard to figure out, right? Anytime when our life is threatened, or someone that we love is threatened, or it appears as though it's being threatened, then we know that's trauma. And sometimes when trauma is fresh, and I've experienced this in my practice, if people come in for therapy really soon after a trauma, you can't really do trauma therapy on somebody because they're in shock. So rather than trying to resolve anybody's traumas, if they come in really fresh, like fresh from combat, I've worked with people who've just come home from combat, or people who were just victims of violent crime, within a week or two of coming to see me, they're still in shock, they're not going to be able to function, and really any kind of intense therapy isn't really going to work. So with trauma, what you really want to do is you want to de-escalate. And that's why we have crisis teams and people who really specialize in trauma, because it is a different animal psychologically, right? We can't just jump in when someone's in shock and try and do therapy. It's not going to work. So for a while, when you're traumatized, if you're lucky enough to have crisis intervention, if you're lucky enough to have help, which most people don't, unless maybe in world disasters they have teams, most of us won't get that. We're kind of in the dark, and we're kind of just feeling around, and we feel disassociated and disconnected, and we're just trying to make it through every day. Not only are we forgetful, but our functioning isn't going to be at its best. I know times when I've gone through trauma, it's like, I look back at those times in my life or those years and I think, wow, you'd think I was on drugs, but I wasn't because I wasn't thinking clearly. And that's almost what it's like. It's like if you were on drugs and you just weren't present. Trauma does that to you, and it can last for a very long period of time. So that should at least give you a good idea of what trauma actually is. Okay, and what causes trauma, and again, there's the obvious things that we discussed: death, abuse, accidents, health crises, watching someone we love die. I probably said loss of your job or your career or your reputation or money or anything that you depend on and you need to live. When it's taken away, it can be traumatizing. Okay, so that's what trauma is. Now, from an emotional standpoint, when I think about trauma, I think about emotions as energy, because they are, right? We can actually detect emotions in labs, and researchers can actually detect emotions by looking at their energy outputs, okay? So we can't necessarily for certain say the difference between different emotions, but right now we can see emotions on PET scans like energy, right? Because all things are energy. So if you think about trauma as being an overwhelming amount of emotion that is not being processed through the normal human emotional processing system, you can think of it as like stuck or trapped emotion, and that's literally what it is. And no one's ever really been able to figure out why, but when we're in shock, that's what the brain and the body do. It feels the threat, it freezes up, it tenses up, you become tearful, you scream, you might not even remember sometimes when you're traumatized, you might block it out. And so that emotion, not only does that emotion get stuck in the body, but the energy of that emotion is stuck in the body, literally, okay? So when people have been traumatized consistently over time, unfortunately, I have quite a few clients that have experienced consistent and continuous trauma throughout their lifetime. They become angry, or severely depressed, or both. It's like their wires are disconnected, right? Because if you think about anything, if you have, I'm trying to think of a good analogy. If you have a cake, a wonderful chocolate cake, my favorite, right? And you throw, if you dump water on the cake's not going to be able to absorb all that water, right? So the water is going to spill over, and it's going to kind of ruin the icing, and it's going to make the cake all mushy. And then over time, it's going to disintegrate the cake, and the cake's going to look and taste bad, right, over time, because you put something on it that it couldn't hold, it couldn't handle. And that's what happens with our emotions and our energetic input from trauma. So if you know people, if you've ever met people who've been in combat or who have had a life of traumatic events, you can see it in their face, you can see in their behavior, but in their thinking and their reactions. But there is hope, and we're gonna uplift you all with that hope tonight, right? So this, just because you've been traumatized doesn't mean that there's no hope for you or that life has to be over, although it certainly does feel like that at times. Okay, so we understand what it is and kind of, what trauma can do to you. And the next thing I want to kind of roll into is I want to talk about triggers and flashbacks, because this is where trauma becomes a big problem for people. And this is where trauma, the experience of trauma, starts to disable people. So when we're very traumatized, whether it's once or multiple times, until that trauma is sort of dealt with over time or dealt with in therapy or a combination of both, we will experience triggers, trauma triggers, and we will experience flashbacks on a very severe, in a very severe cases. Not everyone will have flashbacks, but some people will. But everybody will experience the feeling of triggers. And when you're being triggered, when your traumas are being triggered, it can really disable you in your ability to have relationships, at least healthy ones. It can destroy your functioning socially, at work, with your family, because again, you're not really present anymore. You're not you. You are you, like I said, the chocolate cake with a beautiful chocolate cake with it dumping some water on it. It's like beautiful you with a lot of crap dumped on you. And you have to get the crap off and get it out. And if we don't do that, it sits there and it seeps into us and it makes more problems. And those more problems are the trauma triggers and flashbacks. And again, when I'm thinking about what can be traumatizing, I also think about relationships, because relationships, I believe, have their own set of trauma. And those of us who have been traumatized a lot as children or as adolescents tend to get into relationships that create even more trauma. And those would be known as toxic relationships, right? If you haven't experienced a lot of chaos and trauma in your life, you're not going to get into a toxic relationship because you just wouldn't put up with it. It wouldn't work. But when you see people that are in very toxic, unhealthy relationships, chances are they've been traumatized at some point in their life. And so I believe that we then build relationship trauma, where we get traumatized within the context of the relationship, whether it's infidelity, drugs and alcohol, just being unkind to each other, speaking unkind to each other, threatening each other, playing games of emotional blackmail. All of that stuff is traumatizing. And that all happens more so in the context of romantic relationships. So not only is there life traumas, but I believe there's also a lot of trauma that happens within our own romantic relationships and our own families. And I don't believe it, I know it. I've seen it and I've lived through some of it. Believe me, okay? So how do we know we're being triggered? How do we know we're having a flashback, and what causes that, and what do we do about it? All right, so the triggers, okay, when we're triggered, that stuck energy and that stuck emotion that's just sitting in our heart space, that's sitting in our brains as, unseen memories, that's sitting in our solar plexus, in our guts, in our backs and our hips, that cause aches and pains. When that is unresolved and not cleared out and healed, then it's very easy for us to respond to things that might remind us in some small way of a sight, smell, sound, touch, or taste, or feeling that we experienced when the initial trauma was happening. So for example, let's say that, and I see this all the time, let's say you were, your partner cheated on you. Okay, this is when I see this all the time. Infidelity is extremely traumatizing for the person who, was lied to or betrayed. Okay, I think it's traumatizing for the whole family, but let's just stick with the partner for now. So let's say you find out that your partner's been cheating on you because you picked up their cell phone one day and it was blinking, and you saw another man or another woman, whatever the case may be, on the phone, and you looked at it and you saw it had some sort of romantic or sexual content. Well, immediately when you see that, you are traumatized. You're traumatized because A, you weren't expecting it, and even if you were expecting it, you never really believe it's going to happen, because we sort of disassociate from that painful reality. It can't happen to me. Wouldn't really happen. You probably talked about it with all your friends. Oh, he wouldn't do that. She wouldn't do that. And then there it is, the evidence. And this is a very traumatizing event, because emotionally it shatters this idea or ideal that you had of this person that you're with. So it's like your life just blows up. This person that you share your body with, that you share your heart with, your bed, your bank account, whatever, everything has betrayed you. And that is traumatizing. So once this happens, what I see a lot in my practice is that, all right, let's just say it's a wife, and you have a husband and a wife, and the husband's cheating. The wife finds it on the cell phone. That's always how they find out, guys. So if you're cheating, you'll get caught. And it'll happen from the cell phone, I promise you, or chats or something. So they find out, and they choose to stay in the relationship. They come to me usually for help. And from that point forward, because all of that traumatic intense, heavy emotion and shock is sitting within this woman who was cheated on. Every time her husband goes to pick up the phone to text, or he could be calling his mother, she is going to think that he might be talking to another woman. And that is because the cell phone is a trigger for that trauma that is not resolved. And quite frankly, there are some people who can never really resolve that within the relationship. I find that most can, but some really just can't. They can't get past it. So the trigger is the cell phone. And every time they might hear the name of the person who the husband cheated on, they will have a reaction. They will get triggered. And this can even hold true if you're not married and you were dating someone and you were really into them and they cheated on you or whatever. It's traumatizing. It's really traumatizing. If you, like myself, both my parents died when I was young, and I had a lot of loss in my family, and a lot of family members in and out of the hospital since I was a little girl. So I tend to have trauma that I always think if someone doesn't answer the phone, that they could be dead, right? So we know that that's not likely, right? In a reasonable, rational mind, we know that, they're probably in the shower or at the store or they're seeing a movie or they're just not answering. But when you're traumatized and it's really happened to you, the worst case scenarios happen to you, you're gonna be triggered. I've worked with children who lost one of their parents when they were very young, and whenever the surviving parent would leave to go to the grocery store, just leave the house, the kids would have panic attacks. And that's all trauma triggers. That's all being triggered from the trauma. And as you can see, it can go from a death, it can to a romance. We also tend to associate trauma triggers with places. So let's say you lived in a particular house when your child got cancer or your husband got cancer and then they died in the house. You're probably not going to want to stay in the house. Now again, some people do because they may see it differently. Every case is different, but that house becomes the trigger, right? So people want to move out, or the neighborhood becomes the trigger, or the street becomes the trigger, or a group of people becomes the trigger, or the church or the synagogue or the temple becomes a trigger, right? So places often get very associated also with the traumatic event where they happened. I had clients who were in major car accidents and just wouldn't drive on the highway for years until we really were able to work through it. I talked a little bit on social media that I was attacked by a dog, a pretty vicious dog in my face, and still has a scar. It's on this side, this side. It's right here. And one of my dogs was completely mauled, and I didn't want to walk the dogs by myself for months after. It took me probably 6 months to really feel comfortable walking the dogs again. And I still, to this day, look over my shoulder. So trauma is enduring. I mean, it isn't something that there's a quick fix for, but it is something that we all share in one way or the other. And I think it's important to say that you're not alone, that if you really think about it, we've all experienced trauma of some kind in some way. And that's very important for us to know that we're not alone. We're not alone. So, okay, so we've defined it. We've talked about what it can do to you. We talked about the triggers and the associations that we make with different things and different smells and sights and sounds and songs, right? You might hear a song on the radio that reminds you of this ex that you hated, and you're like, ugh, I don't want to hear that song. Or, oh my God, this was my mother's favorite song, I want to hear it. It's all of these things that come through our senses create this nostalgia that when we're dealing with trauma can be a positive or a negative thing. It just depends. Okay, so now that we've sort of got through all of that, breathe. Okay, let's uplift you with how to cope. How to cope. And I didn't talk about flashbacks, but okay, I'll hit the flashback real quick. So flashbacks are a real thing. They tend to happen in more severe cases. And flashbacks are when a person is triggered, okay? And the example probably everyone can understand would be like, you know, you have someone coming back from combat and from, you know, the battlefields, and they've lived with all these gunshots and loud noises and screaming and all this, you know, banging. And then when they get back to civilian life, to regular life, they can't hear noises or helicopters or watch a war movie, because if they do, they literally have a complete flashback where they think they're actually there. It's a disassociation from reality for just a few moments, and you might see a vet, you know, go like this to cover his ears and get down, right? Kids from school shootings have that, who are in school shootings, they have that kind of trauma. They have flashbacks like that. And really, again, because trauma is relative, technically anyone can have a flashback, but you really see those most common in like really serious cases of post-traumatic stress disorder, which is what we call all that I'm describing. And it's the reactions that happen post-traumatic events. So after the event, all the stuff that happens after is considered post-traumatic stress, okay? Nightmares, flashbacks, triggers, all of that stuff. So what do we do about it? What do we do about it? Because trauma is not an easy thing to get through. And in my 15 years of experience, and I am trained specifically in a trauma resolution therapy that, you know, does work well, there are certain things that I believe and certain things that I do not believe. And again, everybody's different, so take everything I say with a grain of salt, because you can't make a big generalization for everybody, because it is a case by case. But in general, it's been believed in my field that the only way to get through trauma is to relive it, is to bring it all back up, talk about all of it, reprocess the emotions in a safe place, and then you can move on. Now, I've seen that type of therapy work. The military has a very sophisticated method for that. And they actually can put soldiers virtually like back exactly into the battlefield and have them reprocess. But as far as what I do and the people that I work with, I don't believe that you have to relive the trauma to heal. What I do believe, and this is what my course on Sunday will be doing, if you're interested in taking it, is we have to think about what happened to the way we feel about ourselves and life and others as a result of the trauma. That's what's really important, the feelings that we're left with, the thoughts and the emotions and the beliefs that we're left with because of that trauma, not that we have to go back and relive it. So if I have clients that come in that have been severely abused physically or sexually, I don't need them to go back and relive that with me. I wouldn't do that to anybody. I don't need them to do that to heal, and I would never tell them that they have to do that to get better. I think that's actually kind of sick, if you want to know the truth. Why re-traumatize people? It's not necessary. But what we do need to do is kind of clear out that negative, stuck energy, and we do need to understand the impact of the trauma and how that trauma has changed or sort of distorted their belief system about themselves, about relationships, about life, about others. That's what needs the therapy. So as an example, what I'll do with people who are traumatized, let's take an example. Okay, let's take the a child who's been physically abused for years, and they become an adult, and typically they're going to either have severe anger issues, or they're going to be completely withdrawn, or a little bit of both. And they say, Elizabeth, I want to get some help for this. Severely abused by my father. He beat me up every day, and unfortunately this happens. And I want to work through this. I don't then ask them, can you tell me about all the different things that your dad did to you and all the different No, I'm not going to do that. Some therapists will, not me. But what I will explore is, how did that abuse leave you feeling about yourself? Because that's what we need to take a look at. So obviously, if a young child is violently abused by their parents, there's a whole host of issues that are, at least to me, somewhat obvious. If your own parent betrays you, who can you trust, right? So you have trust issues. You're gonna have some serious self-confidence, self-worthiness issues. Because if anyone can treat you like that, then you start to believe that you are that you aren't worthy of love. And with physical abuse always comes mental and verbal too, right? It's all connected, it's all the same. So the feelings of shame and the feelings of guilt and the feelings of I'm never going to be good enough, or I'm not good enough, or I'm just a piece of garbage, those are the feelings that people come out of that kind of trauma with. And those are that belief system is what we can change. And that's how I heal, and I work to heal people who have been through that type of trauma, or any trauma. It's really the same formula. If you take the wife who's been cheated on, or the husband that's been cheated on, what they're left feeling is, I can never trust anybody again. How could I ever trust anyone? How could I not see this coming? How do I even trust myself in picking somebody? What's wrong with me that they went to somebody else? And all of that stuff. And ultimately, what we learn through life, and hopefully through good therapy, is that it's never about us. It's never about us. An abuser abuses because that's how they feel about themselves. They feel that they're worthless. They feel angry. They feel shamed. So they have to abuse other people because that's all they have inside of them. It's not about the innocent child. It's not about the wife or the husband when somebody cheats, although that's always what people think. It's about a choice that somebody made, because of their own issues, because of their own reflection and their own projection of their own inadequacies. And that's really so uplifting to understand and to know that it was never about you. And it's hard to convince people of that. But when you start to really dive deep into the human psyche, and everything is about the person who's doing the action. Right now, however people are perceiving me is unique to them, right? We all have our own minds, our own belief systems, our own ideas of what we like and what we don't like, what we think is good or not good information. And everybody who's watching me tonight has their own take on everything about me. And it's not about me. It's about how you're interpreting what I say, how you're interpreting how I look, how I sound, what I'm talking about. So it has nothing to do with me. And that's a strange thing to sort of wrap your head around, because we are, raised to believe the opposite. We're raised to believe that we're not naturally worthy of things, and that we cause people to behave in certain ways that they do, and that we should feel bad if we stand up for ourselves, or, bad for people who have hurt us, and so on and so forth. And those are all the icky, messy, sticky stuff that sits in our bodies and our brains and our tissues of our muscles and everywhere when we've been hurt deeply and traumatized. And that's really how we uplift people, is by letting them know that it's not about you and it wasn't your fault, and you don't want to continue to live in a victimhood mentality, which we tend to do, especially if we've been traumatized. And it's almost natural, it's okay. When I see people coming in, well, I've been through this and I've been through that, but they did this to me and they did this to me, and we're mad. We didn't want it to happen. Nobody wants to be traumatized. Nobody wants to live in fear. Nobody wants to live feeling like shit all the time, feeling like they're not worthy. But it takes us, we have to be the ones to get a hold of that and realize that nobody's really feeling sorry for you. And do you really want them to anyway? Is that really what you want? It's not. So we tend to go through that victimhood. Poor me, I can't believe they did this to me. What a jerk, what an a-hole, what a this, that. And then we start to take a step back and say, okay, wait a minute. This victim mentality that we all go through at some point is good because it's part of a process of understanding other people's bad behavior towards us, and having other people take accountability. That's a healthy thing for a little while, but it can't be for a lifetime, because then you lose, and then your perpetrator or your traumatizer or your abuser, they go on and you don't. So that abuse or that trauma or that accident or that loss or that whatever is controlling your life and disabling you from all the wonder and beauty that there is in this world. And I know it's hard to see the world that way when you're not feeling like that. And that's precisely why you need to go to a good therapist and watch my show. And there's other people out there that are also doing great work, that really do, that I listen to, that I think are really helpful. So therapy is critical for people who have been severely traumatized. And again, we've all been traumatized. Do I think we all could use some therapy? Probably, probably. Not everybody, but it's probably not gonna hurt anyone. But I think whether it's coming for therapy or whether it's watching, nowadays there's so much great information out there that we can, kind of tune into people that we like, and we can be uplifted by them, and we can learn about ourselves through listening to what they have to say and reading books. There's a lot of good stuff out there, but it is important, I think, to get help if you have been traumatized. I think it's critical. Very, very important. So that's the big picture. Let's talk about the little picture before we sort of wrap it up. So the little picture is the day-to-day stuff, the flashbacks, the triggers, the depression, the anxiety. How do we deal with that in the meantime, right? In the meantime, before we decide to go to therapy, or before we decide to start taking our recovery in our own hands, what do we do? How do we cope? And, there's many different ways of coping, but I think the path of least resistance is always a good place to start. And the path of least resistance is to make peace with it. Just make peace with it. Yeah, I've had a rough life. And sometimes I feel sorry for myself. I don't want to, but I do. And I'm angry that this happened to me, but it happened. It did happen. And it is now a part of that experience is, I don't want to say it's a part of you, but this experience has expanded you in some way. It has expanded you, it has made you bigger, even though you feel smaller, because as you heal, you expand and you become bigger and bigger and brighter and brighter. And that's why healing, upliftment is it's so important. So important to get out into the world and find a healer, find a way to be healed. It's just so important. So day to day, I think we can take that path of least resistance by making peace with it and not try to fight against it. And how could they do this to me? Or how could this have happened? And, F this. That's not going to change anything. It's just going to make you feel like shit. That's all it's going to do. And like I said, we're entitled to that for a little while. We're entitled to that for a little while. So I think after that, step 2 would be kind of coming to the realization that, okay, this happened to me and it hurt me and I'm in pain, but I want to feel better. I want to feel better. I want to enjoy my life. So what is the closest thought that I can have in this moment that will give me relief? What's the easiest thing that will give me relief in this moment? And I don't mean that you have to go from being completely pissed off and depressed and traumatized to being happy, because that's not going to work, right? Too far apart. So if I'm over here in, trauma and anger and depression and being pissed off and feeling sorry for myself, but I know I want to get over here, which is, contentment, joy, whatever. I can't jump from here to there. It's too far. It's not going to work. You won't believe it. So it won't work. So what's the easiest, closest, best feeling thought I can have in this moment? So something I used to do a lot when my mother was dying is, I was pissed off, angry, sad. I'm a victim, I lost both my parents and oh my gosh, and boohoo. Okay. But in the meantime, it happened, right? So I have to learn how to cope with it, right? And I'm still in that process, it's a lifetime, right? But when my mother was dying and I was taking care of her, it was a very dark time for me. But I would force myself to walk outside and say, my God, it's so beautiful. The sun is so beautiful. It's such a beautiful day. And for this moment, just this moment, I'm just going to focus on that. And just that was the closest thing I could get to feeling good in the moment. And it really helped. It really helped to be able to see just a close thought of, oh boy, the sun shines really beautiful today. What a beautiful day. It's easy, right? It's easy. But if I had said, oh, I need to be happy. I need to feel great. I need to be joyful. I mean, that's ridiculous. It's not going to happen. So you have to be realistic in your healing and say, what is the closest good feeling thoughts that I can come up with right here, right now in this moment? And if you do that continuously, very slowly but surely, you find that you're getting through life and you are making a path for yourself. You're making a way for yourself, and you're no longer stuck in that feeling sorry for myself kind of victim place, right? You feel like, okay, I can see some sunshine, I can see some light. And it takes time. And those are the most critical, most important things that you can do for trauma. And it's a day-by-day process. And that's another thing that we have to just, I'm not going to heal overnight. It's going to take some time. Now, one of the things that I do myself, and if it's something that feels right for you, is a lot of my healing was not through was not necessarily through therapy, but it was through the practice of energy healing. And that resonates with me. That works for me. A lot of my clients love it too. And that's probably another show, but that is something that is very special because you can energetically tap into that stuck energy, those ugly, sad emotions, that trauma that's just sitting inside of your body, and you can move it through your body and get it out. And that might sound kind of strange to some of you, but it's really not strange at all, and it works if you are open to it and if you believe in it. And so I kind of did my own healing in that regard. You know, I didn't have a therapist to go to. Well, actually, I could have, but I didn't. So I did it on my own, you know, in that way. And so those are the big things that I wanted to address tonight. And before we wrap it up, I want to talk about what's going on Sunday. And I want to talk about my special sponsors for the evening. I do have sponsors, and I'm always looking for sponsors. And that sponsorship money goes directly back into the show to level up, uplift, and maybe a little bit of my wardrobe. Just kidding. So tonight's show is sponsored by High Flow Funding. We say yes when others say no, and we provide heavy equipment financing solutions for you. So if you're in the construction business, you're looking for a piece of heavy equipment, High Flow Funding's got the best. They are based in Altoona, Pennsylvania, and you should definitely give them a call. Thank you very much to High Flow Funding for your continued support of Uplift and Liz Live and everything that I do. Thank you. And also, Stormy's All About You Primary Care and Medical Spa, specializing in anti-aging and primary care. And that's who I go to for all of my stuff. And when I need a little uplift, you know, little uplifting so my eyes don't look like I'm sleeping as I get older, I go to Stormy. She's awesome. She does my primary care and she does all my other beauty things. She's the best. And she's located right in Aventura. And if you need her for primary care, weight loss, anti-aging, you can call her to consult on all those things, even if you're not in the state of Florida, just for a consultation. And she can at least, you know, walk you and put you in the right direction for those things. So thank you to Stormy, All About You, Primary Care and Med Spa, Anti-Aging Clinic. And thank you to High Flow Funding for your support tonight and always. And for Sunday, what I have going on Sunday is I have a course that is from 12 noon to 2 o'clock in the afternoon, this Sunday, the 25th. And it's all for trauma healing. But rather than it being therapy where it's, you know, one-on-one and it's going to be a class. There's already, you know, some people signed up for it. I don't want it to be big, so there's only a few more spots left. But if you're watching and you want to be a part of it, message me, call me. So what we're going to do is I have some exercises prepared for us to address what I talked about tonight. You know, what are we left feeling as a result of this specific trauma or these traumas? So we're going to work through that together for about an hour or so. And I'm going to do a little lecturing and walking you through it. I think it's going to be really, I want to say fun, but sometimes when we're dealing with trauma, you don't really call it fun. But I'm going to say it's be very uplifting and very enlightening and very special. And I know it will be transforming for you. So if you or you know somebody that needs this kind of help, Sunday would be a great day to join. It's virtual, and for people who are kind of shy, you don't have to turn your cameras on, just the audio so that you can, you know, go through everything. No one has to share anything unless they want to. You know, I'll probably do most of the sharing just to kind of guide people through. And then in the last half an hour, we're going to do some Reiki. I'm going to do some Reiki on the class so that we can really just release all of that stuff and just put it behind us and start to move forward. And I do believe that in 2 hours, we can make some serious headway. And I will be doing lots more courses. So just stay on top of my social media. Make sure you follow me on Instagram. on Facebook and here on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so that you can get made aware. You'll be made aware of all of the different things I'm doing. Make sure I have your email if you message me so I can put you on my list, my email list, or my text. I do a lot by text because I feel like no one even looks at their emails anymore. Very few people. There's so much crap, it gets lost. So I rather text people. So make sure you get me your information. I'm very easy to get a hold of. My stuff's everywhere on the internet. So just send me a message and I will get back to you. And thank you again for my first night back on the mic. I'm so happy. I don't even have my microphone. I think I left it in Sweden, so I have to go get another microphone. That's okay. So hopefully the audio was okay. And I just thank you guys all so much for being here and for watching. I'm honored. And I hope to see some of you on Sunday. And let me just see, never even use this chat. Let's see if anyone has questions. Let's see, live chat. Zen meditate. Okay, where can I find Reiki? Well, you can find it with me. I do Reiki. You can message me, get a hold of me. I do Reiki virtually, and I do some in-person Reiki. If you're in the area, then I have an office where I can do Reiki. But I also do it virtually, which it's just as powerful. Sometimes I think it's more powerful. So if you are looking for Reiki, you can contact me and I'd be happy to accommodate you. And thank you again all for watching. And I'll see you back here for the next episode of Uplift Me next Wednesday night at 8 o'clock. See you then. Thank you for watching. Now, how do I turn this off? Let's see.